I wasn't searching for anything disturbing. That's the part that still bothers me. I was doing what everyone does late at night, scrolling, half bored, half numb, skimming through Reddit like it was background noise. Memes, arguments, fake stories pretending to be real. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that follows you afterward. Then I clicked a post that didn't have a title anymore. No username. No upvotes. Just a gray block of text with a warning tag I'd never seen before. I remember thinking it was a glitch. Reddit does that sometimes. Except this one loaded slowly line by line, like it was hesitating. I checked the comments first. There were dozens of them. But every single reply was marked deleted, not removed, not moderated. Deleted by the users themselves. All within the same 5-minute window. That's when the page refreshed. The post disappeared. I wish I had closed the tab right there. I wish curiosity wasn't such a reliable weakness. Instead, I went looking for it. Catch pages, archives, reposts, and somehow, I found a copy that hadn't been wiped yet. I'm telling you this now for one reason. Once you read it, you can't unread it. And once you know what I know, you start noticing things you were never meant to connect. This isn't a creepypasta. That's what everyone says right before they lie to themselves. This was written like a confession. Messy, rushed, apologetic. Like someone typing with the knowledge that they were running out of time. What scares me isn't what the post claimed happened. It's what happened after. Every account that interacted with it stopped posting. No activity. No comments. No goodbyes. Just silence. Frozen in time like a group photo where everyone blinked at once. If you're still listening after this, that's on you. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to pay attention. Because the moment you start seeing these posts as just stories, you stop noticing when one of them slips through by accident. And the first confession looked harmless enough. Confession 1. I thought it was just a job. I took the job because it didn't ask questions. That should have been my first red flag. But when you're broke enough, red flags just look like decorations. The listing was vague. Overnight administrative support, flexible hours, competitive pay. No company name. No logo. Just an email address that ended in a string of numbers instead of a domain. They replied within 10 minutes. The interview wasn't really an interview. The guy on the call, Mark, he said, did most of the talking. He didn't ask about my experience, just whether I could follow instructions, whether I was comfortable with discretion, and whether I minded being paid in cash. I remember laughing a little and saying, "Is this legal?" There was a pause. Then Mark said, "It's necessary." The building was downtown, wedged between a dentist's office and a closed-down travel agency. From the outside, it looked like every other office block, tinted windows. Keypad entry, no sign. Inside, it smelled like dust and old carpet cleaner. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering just enough to be annoying. There were 5 of us on the night shift. No one used last names. No one talked about what they did outside of work. We were given ID cards that only worked after midnight, and a single rule that was repeated so often it became a jokey. Do not go into the basement unless instructed. The thing is, the building plans posted by the elevator didn't list a basement. My job was simple. Monitor a queue of digital forms that came in through an internal system. Each one was labeled with a code, a timestamp, and a short description. Property dispute, missing item, noise complaint, boring stuff. I'd flag them, forward them, log the time, and move on. Every now and then, one would come through with no description at all. Just the code and a blinking cursor. The first time I asked about it, Jenna, who'd been there longer than anyone, leaned over and whispered, "Don't ask." I thought she was joking. "Seriously," she said, not smiling. "They told us not to ask questions." Those blank forms were always handled by Mark. He'd appear silently behind your chair, read the screen, nod once, and tell you to take a break. By the time you got back, the entry would be gone. One night, around 2:40 a.m., the power flickered. Not off. Just enough for the lights to dim and come back wrong. A little too yellow. a little too quiet. The hum of the building changed pitch, like it was breathing differently. That's when we heard it. A sound from below us. A deep, metallic thud, followed by something that might have been a voice, or might have just been air moving through pipes that weren't on any blueprint. I stood up without thinking. Jenna grabbed my wrist. "Don't," she said. "It's not our problem." "But did you hear?" "Yes," she snapped. Then, softer. We all did. Mark showed up a minute later. Calm, apologetic. He said there'd been an equipment issue, and that everything was under control. Someone asked if we should log it. He shook his head. No record. The next morning, one of the forms in the system referenced a noise complaint at our address. No one acknowledged it. Weeks passed. The pay was good. The hours were quiet. I told myself every company had weird quirks, especially ones that worked nights. Especially ones that paid in cash, slipped into envelopes with our first names written in careful block letters. Then I noticed the timestamps. Some forms were coming in before they were submitted. Others were dated hours, or days, into the future. When I pointed this out, Mark sighed like a disappointed parent. "Time isn't always linear in our line of work," he said. "You don't need to understand it. You just need to log it." The basement door was at the end of the hall, past the bathrooms. Heavy steel, no handle on our side. Sometimes, when the building went quiet enough, I swore I could hear movement behind it, like something being dragged slowly across concrete. One night, Jenna didn't come back from her break. Her ID card was found on her desk the next morning. Her chair was still warm. Mark told us she'd violated protocol, and that her position had been filled. Sure enough, there was a new name on the schedule by the end of the shift. No one asked what happened to her. That's the part I'm most ashamed of. Not that I stayed, but that I learned how easy it was to stay quiet. How quickly fear turns into routine. How you start convincing yourself that if you just follow the rules, whatever's happening in the basement has nothing to do with you. At this point, I still thought it was human evil. I was wrong. Confession too. We all agreed not to talk about it. There were 6 of us who knew what really happened. That number matters. I've replayed the night enough times to be sure of it. 6 people in a place that was only supposed to hold 4. 6 witnesses. 6 liars. It started as a weekend trip. One of those forced reconnection things adults do when they realize they're drifting apart. Cabin in the woods, no signal, board games, cheap alcohol. We joked about it being a horror movie set up the entire drive there. Rule number 1. Aaron laughed, tossing his phone into the glove compartment. If something weird happens, we leave. We didn't leave. The cabin was older than the listing suggested. The floorboards creaked in ways that didn't match where anyone was standing. There were scratches on the inside of the bedroom doors, low and deep, like someone had dragged furniture while lying down. The first night passed without incident. Too quietly, if I'm being honest. No animals. No wind. Just the sound of the trees pressing in. The second night, the knocking started. 3 slow taps on the front door. We froze. No one moved. Aaron checked his watch and muttered, "It's past midnight." Another 3 knocks. Louder. "Probably a hiker," Sarah said, though her voice didn't believe it. "Someone lost." We argued in whispers. "Open the door." "Don't open the door." "Call for help." No signal. The third knock came from the back of the cabin. That's when Mark said the thing we all pretended not to hear. "It knows we're here." We didn't answer. We didn't look outside. We sat there until the knocking stopped on its own. In the morning, there were footprints around the cabin. Bare feet. Too many joints in the toes. We should have left then. Instead, we stayed. Pride, curiosity, denial. It doesn't matter which one you blame. By the third night, we were all sleeping in the same room. That's when it came inside. I don't remember the door opening. I remember the smell first. Wet earth and something sore, like old meat left in the sun. Then the weight on the floorboards. Slow, deliberate. Aaron woke up screaming. What happened next is messy. Shouting. Someone throwing a chair. Someone else crying. I remember seeing its face only for a second. Too long, stretched wrong. Eyes reflecting light like an animal's. It spoke. Not in a voice, exactly. More like it borrowed the idea of voices. My name came out of its mouth in my mother's tone. We ran. We didn't stop running until dawn. Aaron didn't make it. The police called it an accident. Exposure. Fall injuries. They didn't mention the bruises shaped like hands that weren't human. They didn't explain why his phone was found crushed flat, like it had been stepped on by something impossibly heavy. At the station, before they separated us, Sarah leaned in close and said, "We don't talk about this. Ever." We all agreed. We made a pact. No posts, no messages, no just checking in conversations. We deleted photos. We blocked each other. We acted like that weekend never happened. For a while, it worked. Then, 3 years later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Aaron, it doesn't forget faces." I stared at that message for a full minute before replying. "Me, this isn't funny." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Aaron, one of you talked." My phone rang immediately after. I didn't answer. None of us did. But our group chat, long deleted, reappeared on my screen, populating itself message by message. "Mark, how is this possible?" "Sarah, who said something?" "Lena, I told my therapist." I didn't use names. "Aaron, that was enough." The arguing spiraled. Accusations, guilt, fear. Sarah begged us to stop typing. "Sarah, if one of us talks, it comes back. Sarah, please. You don't know what you've done." That night, Mark disappeared. No body. No accident report. Just an abandoned car and a voicemail sent to all of us at the same time. Heavy breathing. Footsteps in leaves. And a final sentence, whispered so quietly I almost missed it. "It knows where you live." I locked every door. I covered every window. I didn't sleep. Since then, I've started seeing things out of the corner of my eye. Bare footprints in places they shouldn't be. Reflections that lag behind my movements by half a second. Maybe it's coincidence. Trauma does that to people, right? Except Sarah stopped answering messages last week, and this morning, I found muddy footprints outside my bedroom door. I stopped believing these were coincidences. I stopped reading these posts like stories after the third one. At some point, it stops feeling like entertainment and starts feeling like research, like you're piecing together something that doesn't want to be understood all at once. I told myself I was just curious. Morbid curiosity, sure, but harmless. That's a lie people tell themselves right before patterns start forming. I've read hundreds of these confessions now. Deleted posts, archived threads, screenshots reposted by accounts that vanish a week later. Different subreddits, different writing styles, different excuses for why someone is finally speaking up. But the details repeat. Not themes. Rules. Basements that aren't on blueprints. Cabins where you're told not to open the door after midnight. Jobs that pay in cash and don't ask questions. Agreements that work only as long as everyone stays silent. The symbols repeat too. Triangles drawn wrong. Numbers written over door frames. Footprints that don't match any known anatomy. And always, the same warning buried somewhere in the comments before the thread disappears. Don't name it. Don't document it. Don't let it know you remember. I started tagging these cases privately. Not by subreddit, but by behavior. The job. The pact. The knock. The basement. Some of you might recognize those labels. If you've been reading these kinds of posts long enough, you've probably seen them too. Even if you didn't realize it at the time. That's what scares me the most. Not that these things exist, but that they follow consistent logic. Like something learning from repetition. Refining itself. I know how this sounds. Like I'm forcing connections where there aren't any. That's what I told myself until I noticed people in the comments starting to say the same things, unprompted. Different accounts, different years. Why does this always involve a rule you're not allowed to break? Why does silence matter so much? Why does it come back when you talk? If you've noticed these patterns too, I want you to say something. Or maybe I don't. I don't know anymore. Part of me hopes I'm wrong. Another part hopes the comments will prove I'm not alone in seeing this. Because these stories weren't random. They followed rules. And then I found the post that explained why. Confession 3. My family knows what happens after death. My family treats death like a scheduled appointment. That's the easiest way I can explain it without sounding insane. Funerals were never chaotic in our house. No screaming. No hysterics. No unanswered questions whispered into pillows at night. When someone died, we mourned. But there was always an undercurrent of certainty. Like everyone else had already read the last page of the book. I didn't realize how strange that was until I was old enough to notice other families falling apart. When my grandmother died, I was 9. She passed in her sleep, hands folded neatly over her chest, expression calm, the house filled with relatives within hours. They hugged, they cried. And then, before the sun went down, my father closed all the curtains and said, very clearly, "No one leaves tonight." I thought it was about grief. It wasn't. After dinner we gathered in the living room. Candles were lit, not for ambience but for symmetry. Always an even number, always white. My aunt handed me a small bowl of salt and told me to keep it close. "Don't spill it," she said. "And don't fall asleep." I asked why. She smiled, the way adults do when they're deciding how much truth a child can handle. "Because Grandma will be passing through." I laughed. Everyone else didn't. That was the first rule I ever learned. The dead don't leave right away. As I got older, the rules became more explicit. They were taught casually, folded into conversations the way other families talked about taxes or insurance. Never stand in a doorway after midnight during the 3 days following a death. Never say the deceased's name out loud on the first night. If you hear footsteps when no one is walking, don't acknowledge them. And above all, never interfere. "It's not our place," my father would say. "We don't make the rules. We just follow them." I assumed it was cultural, religious, something old and symbolic. Even when I moved away, even when I stopped believing in most of what I was raised with, those habits stuck. Muscle memory. Superstition. Then my younger brother died. Car accident. Instant, they said. No pain. No fear. Everyone told me that like it was supposed to help. I flew home the same night. The house felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. Too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath. My mother hugged me and whispered, "We're already late." Late for what? They didn't answer. That night they did everything by the book. Curtains closed, candles placed, salt bowls distributed. My brother's body wasn't in the house. That rule had changed decades ago. But his presence was. I felt it. Pressure. Like standing too close to something immense and patient. The air was cold in places it shouldn't have been. My father warned us, again and again, not to speak his name. Around 200 a.m., I heard crying, not sobbing, not breathing. Crying, like someone trying to remember how. It came from the hallway. I stood up. My mother grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. "Don't," she said, eyes wide. "That's not for us." "But it's him," I whispered. "He's scared." Her voice broke. "So are we." The crying moved past the door. Slow footsteps followed. Heavy. Uneven. Something brushed against the wall, and every candle flickered at once. That's when my father finally told me the truth. Death isn't a door. It's a process. And not everyone is allowed to complete it. Some people, most people actually, pass through without incident. They don't linger. They don't look back. They don't notice what waits in the in-between. But others, the ones who die suddenly, violently, unprepared, they get stuck, my father said. And when they realize that, something else realizes it too. I asked what that something was. He shook his head. Doesn't matter. Naming it gives it permission. The rules weren't to protect us from the dead. They were to protect the dead from what comes after. At dawn, the crying stopped. The pressure lifted. The house exhaled. My family relaxed just a little. "He made it," my aunt said quietly. "We did our job." I didn't believe them. Not fully. Grief messes with perception. Trauma invents monsters. Then, 3 nights later, I got a voicemail from my brother's phone. No words. Just breathing. Slow. Calm. Like someone who had finally caught their breath after almost drowning. I played it for my parents. My mother started screaming. That's when they told me the part they'd hoped I'd never need to know. Sometimes the rituals fail. Sometimes the dead don't move on peacefully. And when that happens, they don't come back wrong. They come back empty. You're not meant to die peacefully, my father said. Not anymore. Not like before. Something changed. I asked him how he knew. He looked at me for a long time before answering. Because some people aren't allowed to move on, he said. And something is very interested in making sure they don't. That night, I dreamed of my brother standing at the foot of my bed, smiling, waiting. Behind him, stretching into darkness, was something vast and patient, something that had learned our rules and was adapting. I woke up knowing one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't a story anymore. This was a warning. Confession 4. I helped cover it up. I used to think monsters needed claws, that if something was truly evil, it would announce itself. Blood, screaming, news coverage. I told myself that lie, because it made my part in this easier to swallow. Because it let me believe I was just another cog in a broken machine instead of the reason it kept working. They didn't recruit me because I was special. They recruited me because I was ordinary. I worked in records, municipal level. The kind of office where nothing feels important because everything is. Permits, incident reports, zoning adjustments. Paperwork that quietly decides what exists and what never officially did. When the request first came through, it looked like a clerical error, a death certificate with no cause of death listed. No hospital. No responding officer. Just a name, an address, and a time that didn't make sense. The timestamp predated the 9/11 call by almost 4 hours. I flagged it. An hour later, my supervisor called me into his office. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "Don't escalate this one," he said, sliding the file back across the desk. "It's been handled." "Handled by who?" I asked. He smiled thinly. "Above us." That should have been the end of it. Instead, it became the beginning. More files started appearing, always incomplete, always inconsistent, and always followed by the same quiet instruction: let it go. I joked about it at first. Dark humor is how you survive bureaucracy. Wes the Grim Reaper forgot his paperwork. I muttered once. No one laughed. The first time I knowingly altered a record, I told myself it was for the greater good. The report described an animal attack in a residential area with no animal traces, no witnesses, and injuries that didn't match anything in the database. "Just change it to accidental fall," my supervisor said. "Stairs. Happens all the time." I hesitated. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Do you want to know what happens when these don't get filed correctly?" I shook my head. "Good," he said. "Neither do I." After that, the rationalizations came easily. If the family gets closure, does the truth really matter? If panic causes more harm, isn't silence kinder? If something wants attention, aren't we safer starving it? I told myself it was better this way. The jokes got darker. We started calling them ghost files. Cases that would show up, get quietly adjusted, and vanish into the system like they'd never existed. New hires were warned, gently, not to ask about them. They needed someone ordinary. My supervisor said once, half drunk at a work function. "That's why they picked us." Picked us for what? I didn't ask. Then came the night shift audit. I was alone in the office when I noticed a cluster of records all tied to the same location. A warehouse on the edge of the city. Zoning disputes. Noise complaints. Missing persons. Fire inspections that were signed off without inspections ever taking place. The timestamps overlapped. Some of the reports were filed after the people involved were declared dead. My phone buzzed. "Supervisor, stop looking." I didn't respond. Another message. "Supervisor, please." I scrolled anyway. There were notes buried in the system. Internal comments never meant to be read in sequence. Notations about containment, about cycles, about compliance breaches. A one line froze me in place. "If documentation persists, escalation occurs." That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy, unhurried. I called out, assuming security. No answer. The footsteps stopped outside my office door. The handle didn't turn. It just rested there, like someone was considering whether I was worth the effort. My phone rang. My supervisor again. Did you read it? He asked. Yes. A long silence. Then you understand, he said finally. This is why we clean it up. This is why we lie. Because when these things are acknowledged, documented, they don't just happen more often. He swallowed. They happen louder. The footsteps retreated. I sat there until morning staring at the screen, watching the files auto-correct themselves. Names disappearing. Locations reassigned. Deaths turned into clerical non-events. By the end of the week, the warehouse didn't exist on any map. I quit a month later, moved cities, changed jobs, told myself I was done. Then I started seeing the posts. Reddit confessions, deleted threads, stories that sounded uncomfortably familiar, basements not on blueprints, rules you're not allowed to break, things that get worse when you talk about them. That's when it clicked. The cover-ups weren't just damage control. They were part of the system. And that's when I realized the posts were instructions. If you're still listening, it means you did what I did. You stayed. That's not an accusation. It's just a fact. Most people click away somewhere between the second and third confession. They decide it's too dark. Or probably fake. Or they suddenly remember something important they need to do. The ones who stay aren't braver. They're curious. That's the common thread no one likes to admit. I laid all the cases out side by side. Not emotionally, logically. Locations first. Then dates. Then the details everyone glosses over because they don't seem important at the time. The job that didn't ask questions. The cabin with the knocking after midnight. The family rituals meant to keep something from claiming the dead. The records that quietly erase what shouldn't exist. Same city. Same outskirts. Same industrial zones and forgotten roads. Different years. Different people. Same symbols tucked into the margins. Triangles that don't quite close. Numbers that repeat in groups of 6. Rules that only work if you follow them exactly. And silence. Silence isn't just encouraged, it's enforced. Every story collapses the moment someone talks too much. Every incident escalates when it's documented, shared, named. The posts that survive longest are the ones framed as just stories, fiction, entertainment, plausible deniability wrapped in anonymity. That's where you come in. You're not just listening, you're witnessing. You're reading patterns, forming theories, leaving comments that say things like, "This reminds me of," or "I saw something similar once." Even if you don't type a word, even if you're just lurking, it still counts. Reading counts. Knowing counts. I've watched comment sections lock within hours. Accounts wiped clean overnight. People who were active for years suddenly stopped posting entirely. No announcement. No farewell. Just a hard stop, like a feed that hit the end of the tape. And before you ask, yes, I checked. The warehouse from the records. Someone mentioned it in a comment last year. The cabin location. A user dropped coordinates before deleting their account mid-thread. The family rituals. Buried in a reply chain that never finished loading. They're not coincidences. They're leaks. You might be thinking, so what? Information spreads. Stories overlap. That's the internet. But here's the part no one puts in the posts: participation accelerates things. The more eyes on it, the faster it adapts. The more it learns what we notice, what we fear, what we ignore. That's why the rules keep changing just enough to stay ahead of us. That's why it doesn't need everyone, just enough. If this was just about containment, they wouldn't let these confessions exist at all. The fact that some of them stay up, briefly, inconsistently, isn't a failure. It's a test. So if you've felt that itch while listening, the urge to comment, to share, to ask if anyone else has seen something like this, that's not accidental. That's the hook working exactly as intended. I don't know what happens when enough people put the pieces together. I only know what happens to the ones who do it alone. There's one last confession. It wasn't meant to be posted. Final confession. This is my last post. I don't have much time. If you're reading this, it means the post stayed up longer than I expected. That's bad. That means it's watching who reads it now, not just that it exists. I wasn't supposed to connect the others. I know that. I know the rules. I followed them longer than most. I kept my head down. I changed records. I stayed quiet. I told myself the stories were warnings meant for other people. Then I recognized the symbol. It was carved into the doorframe of my apartment last night. Shallow, like someone didn't want to make noise. 3 lines that almost form a triangle, with the bottom left open. I didn't have to look it up. I'd seen it before. In case notes, in deleted photos, in posts that vanished minutes later. That's when I ran. I packed a bag, cash only, left my phone behind. Or I thought I did. Somehow, it's still here, still working, still letting me type this. I can hear it in the hallway, not footsteps. Pressure. Like the air itself is being compressed with each movement. The lights flicker every time it gets closer. I don't think it needs to knock anymore. If you're wondering why I'm posting this instead of calling the police, it's because I already tried. The call connected, stayed silent for 11 seconds. Then a voice said my name back to me. Wrong. Too slow. Like it was learning how to use it. I'm not special. That's the worst part. I'm not chosen or cursed or important. I'm just another data point that noticed the pattern too clearly. They need people like that. People who document. People who connect things. People who leave trails behind without meaning to. It's at the door now. I can see the handle moving, not turning, just being tested. Like it's checking whether the rule still applies. Like it's waiting for permission I don't remember giving. If anyone finds this later, tell the others this much. Silence isn't safety. Documentation isn't protection. And whatever comes after death is paying attention. The door is opening. If this cuts off, it means I was right. It means it doesn't want witnesses. Just participants. I can hear it breathing now. I think it knows I'm typing. I think it knows you're reading. If you've made it this far, I won't thank you for listening. Thanks implies safety, closure, the idea that something ended cleanly. None of that applies here. I keep thinking about the last post, the way it cut off mid-sentence. Like so many others. No update, no resolution. Just silence where a human voice used to be. That's usually where stories stop. But these don't stop. They circulate. They get reposted, reframed, dismissed, half remembered. Someone always stumbles onto them late at night and tells themselves it's just another creepy thread. Until it isn't. Maybe the rules are changing. Maybe they always were. Maybe the only reason we notice now is because there are more of us looking at the same time. Watching. Commenting. Connecting dots that weren't meant to line up. I don't have answers. Anyone who claims they do is lying, or already gone. What I do know is this: the pattern continues whether we acknowledge it or not. Silence didn't stop it. Cover-ups didn't stop it. Rituals only slowed it down. So if you've seen posts like these before, ones that vanish, or feel unfinished, or leave you with the sense that something important was being said, say so. Compare notes. Share theories. Help document what slips through. Or don't. Just understand that choosing not to look doesn't mean you weren't seen. Because if you see a post disappear after this, don't scroll past it.